Alright, so this is the Y-pipe kit that they offer as an extra add-on. I went ahead and bought it because I don't want to have to mess with it. And you can see it's got a section there with a cutout or bypass with a gasket to seal it off when you're not using it. And then the Y-pipe part itself and an extension. So I'm getting to get down there and figure out the order that it goes in, because of course it doesn't have any instructions. I should be able to dope it out based on the existing stuff that I got in there. Alright, so I got it all on there. Essentially there's a short pipe that goes from the downpipe, and that's not a straight pipe. It's got angled collars on it to kick the exhaust out towards the middle of the car. And then the second piece is the part with the cutout. I haven't put that on yet. And I don't know whether I'll use that or not. It just depends. I might at some point, but it's the kind where you have to unbolt the block off plate from it, and that sounds like a pain in the butt to me unless I really need it. And then it goes off to the Y-pipe, and then the Y-pipe goes to, yes, I've got a string on there just to hang it almost, and then onto the back. This is a MagnaFlow stainless. It's been on there for a few years. It's still in good shape, but it's a little dirty. There's no hangers on this, so right now all of the stress is taken up by the hangers at the back of the mufflers and the downpipe itself, which I don't want all those stresses on the back of the turbo. So I'm going to go ahead and probably take it to the exhaust shop and have them put weld a couple of hangers onto that pipe right there, so it can bolt in to where the factory mount was, just to take some of the stresses off there. I could probably make it myself, but I don't, and I may yet. I haven't decided yet, but I'm not going to drive it too far like this, because I just don't like the idea of that whole weight of that exhaust hanging on the downpipe, because I just think that's a bad idea. So actually it went together pretty well. I think it might be touching the front of the torque arm a little bit right in there. It's tough to see. I can't really get in there very well, but that's the front mount for the torque arm, and it's probably going to hit that. And because these aren't ball and socket joints, there's not a whole lot of adjustability. I know that looks cool, and it's a nice secure fit, but it gives you absolutely no leeway to wiggle things around and get them where you want them. So I may have to enlist the aid of a local shop. We've got a good one in town, but we'll see how it goes. But that's how that went in. It wasn't too bad, just a lot of crawling around under the car, which is always fun. Alright, putting on the wastegate, and this is the kind of stuff that makes me want to punch people. Alright, so when you get the wastegate on there, there's a spring-loaded fire ring in there that you have to place a good amount of force against in order to get it to sit flush with the crossover pipe. So trying to do this one-handed, I basically had to put a clamp on it just to clamp it down. Then when you put this clamp ring over here, look how short this bolt is. You know, how hard would it be to make that bolt another 10 millimeters or a quarter inch or whatever? I mean, you can't get the nut on that. And if you're trying to do it one-handed without somebody to hold it for you, it's even more impossible. There's not even enough room there to clamp this with a pair of pliers and still get the nut on there. So I'm struggling with this. I'll get it on there eventually, I guarantee you. But really, just make the daggum bolt a little longer, and it'll be easy to get the nut started. Alright, end rant. Alright, I got it on there. I mean, it was a pain in the ass, but I got it on there. And this project's been full of stuff like that, where it seems like it should just be a straightforward nut and bolt thing, but something's in the way, or the bolt's too short, or some other thing like that. So, I mean, nothing's going to be perfect when you're dealing with stuff like this, but yeah, just add that to the list. I clocked it so that it's not any lower than anything else down here, and it's kind of pointing to the rear. I'll come back and check it after a little bit of use and driving, make sure that it hasn't loosened up. But I'm afraid to tighten that thing down as much as I could tighten it down, because, man, if it snaps or it breaks off, I'll be trying to get another clamp, and I don't want to do that. So the dipstick mounting bracket was horrible, and I needed to make a new one. So I started out with just a strip of mild steel, put a hole in it. It'll go under the valve cover nut, bent it over in a couple different ways and trimmed it up, and then put some spot welds in it, and took care of it. Alright, so pretty much finished the dipstick. Had to make a new mount for it, and there it is. Yeah, in all its glory. I just knocked down some of those welds. It'll stay, it's not going anywhere, and it should fit pretty well in the valve cover. So I'll paint it, and then I'll put a little bit of, just a tad bit of RTV on it to keep it from falling out of there, and we'll call that part good. Alright, so I finished up with the dipstick part of the project, got it in there, bolted in. Now it's connected to the valve cover, and that should be secure. It's plenty tight. I mean, it might look a little flimsy in the photographs, but it's not. It's fine. It won't go anywhere. But just a tiny bit of RTV around the bottom where it goes into the block and oil pan. And as before, I'll probably put a zip tie around it just to make sure it doesn't pop out. Thought about getting one of those locking dipsticks, and well, if it turns out to be a problem, I'll do that. But for right now, we'll let it ride. The next order of business is to get the vacuum and boost control situation sorted out. So we've got basically a situation where some items don't mind seeing boost, and other items I don't want to see boost. So I've basically divided the vacuum system into two separate systems. So the brake booster, even though it's got its own check valve, I don't know how many PSI that's worth, and I'm not going to try to rely on that at 5 and 7 pounds and maybe even more. So I've got a check valve in route, and what I'm going to do is tap this with a check valve and have it run both the brake booster, the PCV, and the HVAC system. And so those three will only see vacuum and not see boost, and that'll protect them from damage from boost conditions and still have them operate correctly when the engine's operating under vacuum. The items that will see boost are obviously the fuel pressure regulator. I'll talk more about that later. The blow-off valve, the wastegate, and the map sensor. And those will all be on a separate system without a check valve from one of the other vacuum taps from this trick flow manifold. There's a couple on the bottom on this side and a couple on the back, and then this one on the back side. I haven't decided exactly which ones I'm going to use and which ones I'm going to block yet. But the way I'm going to accomplish that is that I got these vacuum manifolds from Amazon. They're a company called, you pronounce that, Duhel. Alright, and essentially each one of these manifolds has 6 ports on it, and an inlet and another inlet or block. It depends on whether you want to daisy chain them together, and a couple mounting spots. And they come with a selection of fittings for each one of those, and you block off the ones you don't want, which I'll probably have to find some. I know I won't use them all, so I'll have to have some plugs to go in there. I think those are quarter MPT. We'll take a look at that. And so one of these will operate with a check valve for those items that I mentioned that don't want to see boost, and the other one will operate straight from vacuum all the way through full boost pressure. And I'm going to mount those on the quick little spruce up for the firewall there, and to get rid of some of that old cracked paint and chip stuff. Once it's good and dry, I'll continue on. Still some red junk over there. I'll get that at another point. Alright. I'm starting out with the blow-off valve, and it's hard to see down in there, but let's see if I can get you down in there. There it is, kind of, sort of. Alright, so I put the fitting on there, attached a vacuum line to it, and a hose clamp. And now I'm going to work on routing it up towards the firewall. So, blow-off valve, essentially, while you're under boost, it stays shut, and if you close the throttle, let off on the gas, you don't want that boost to back up in the inlet tract. So the blow-off valve lets it alleviate that pressure, and essentially does that by reference into the boost. So when it sees boost, it keeps that valve slammed shut, and then when the boost goes away, it's just the amount of spring pressure that's in a blow-off valve that lets the excess air escape to atmosphere. So this will go to a boost referenced section of the line, and this is kind of lightweight. Although it's pretty stout, it's not your regular just thin wall vacuum tube. This is, let's see, that's upside down, of course. And this is 1/4 inch fuel line hose. So, and it's rated for 3.4 bar, which is pretty good. I won't use all that, but I've got another section that's a little less expensive than this that says not for fuel lines, but that's okay because it's not really for super high pressure, and I'm not running that much through it anyways. But I try to use the quality stuff when I can. All right, continuing on with some of the vacuum system modifications, what call it what you will. This factory check valve here is to maintain vacuum once the car is shut off. It goes to the reservoir. This line right here goes to the vacuum reservoir, which is underneath the fender, which is basically just this little ball right here, and that keeps a vacuum. Let's see if I can get a better picture of it there. It's in all the cars, and it comes up there. So Ford used these hard plastic lines, and they're really prone to breakage. Like if I hadn't noticed this right here, there you go, piece of crap. Now I'm going to replace that. I've got some 1/4 inch heavy duty line right here for emission system, so I can replace that one fairly straightforwardly. But it's got another one that goes into the HVAC system, and the last time I had that out I probably should have replaced it, but I didn't. I have made a repair to it once before. Underneath that piece of tubing there is heat shrink that I sealed to the tube to make a repair, and it's been holding up fine. That piece right there is just a protective sleeve to keep it from flexing unnecessarily, so I got to be careful with this one not to screw it up. But the one that goes to the vacuum reservoir, I'm just going to, rather than try to repair it, I'm just going to replace it all together. And I'll retain this because I like it, but again, it'll be connected to one of the vacuum sources with a check valve in line with the whole system, so that this check valve doesn't have to see any positive pressure whatsoever. It'll only see vacuum up to atmospheric the way it's designed to, and that ought to keep it from getting turning into a vacuum leak later on and affecting boost and whatnot. So that's what I'm going to do next. Alright, so that'll do for the vacuum reservoir and the HVAC system. It's tucked in there, and zip tied it to the brake line. It'll be fine, and run the line along top of there, and then eventually it'll go into the distribution block once I get it mounted. And yes, I marked it. So for the low pressure stuff, that just leaves the PCV, the brake booster, and the high pressure stuff we still have to do the wastegate and the fuel pressure regulator. Alright, while I got the vacuum manifolds on the bench, I thought I'd go through it real quick. This manifold is the one that's going to be check valve to only see vacuum, and so there'll be the check valve prior to this point right here, so it'll come from the manifold to the check valve to this entry port right here, and then most of them are blocked off. This one right here will be for the PCV system. It's got a little bit bigger hole than the ones that came with the kit, and I like that one because it's actually got a flow through there. So this will be attached to the separator so that this doesn't fill up with a bunch of oil and everything, and then to the PCV. And this will be for the HVAC, and then this will come out and go back to the brake booster. Alright, the reason why I elected to do it like that with the big ends is because this particular manifold will see a lot of flow, actual air movement, especially through the PCV. So I wanted a big inlet, and for the booster as well. For the PCV, this one's going to be appropriate, and I'll probably just do it that way, and you can see the other ports are plugged up. Alright, for this one, essentially everything in here is going to be, for the most part, static, except for the wastegate, which really doesn't move a whole lot of air. It just tends to modulate the air that's already in there. But essentially this will be the input. Both ends are capped off because there's not a whole lot of flow going through there, so this will be fine to supply the whole thing. So this will be to a vacuum source. We've got the 2-bar map sensor here, fuel pressure here, blow-off valve, and then wastegate reference, and then to the solenoid right here, and then onto the wastegate itself. So there'll be 2 ports for the for the wastegate, one for the bottom, and one for the top. At least at this point, it's going to look like that. I'm still doing some research and figuring it out. You might wonder about this boost solenoid. Since I'm using an AEM Series 1, the types of boost solenoids that were out at the time that was manufactured weren't that popular. So this is a GM solenoid, and it's the part 152. I don't know if you can see that there, and they're still available to get. And it essentially will be plug and play and is well understood by the AEM Series 1. The other boost solenoids would probably work too, but that's the one that it recommended, and they all accomplish essentially the same function, so I'm going to use that one and see how it works. So that's just a general mock-up, and I'm just waiting on the check valve to come in the mail. Once I get that check valve in, I'll be able to assemble it all, and these two units will mount to the firewall next to each other with enough room for the cabling cords and the separator and everything, so they won't be right next to each other. They'll be kind of spread out. Yeah, I'll just figure that out once I get everything in place, but that's essentially how it's going to wind up being distributed between the two. What's this? Is that perhaps rain? Amazing. It's been over 2 months. Just a little sun shower, but we'll take it. All right, on further reflection, there's not enough room to put these vacuum blocks in how I originally wanted to do it like this. There just isn't room between the hood closing and the seam between there. It's just not going to work. So scratch my head a little bit, and basically nothing says they have to be horizontal or vertical. So I'm going to mount them horizontal with a bracket, and they'll just sit out like this. So one here and one over in that area there. Still to be determined the exact spot, but just got a little angle aluminum, and we'll make a bracket to hold them there. And that's how that's going to work. So here we go. All right, a little work on the drill press and some measuring and a trip to Lowe's for some aluminum angle. And I got a couple of brackets that I can use. So pretty straightforward, just mark the holes on there. Drilled them out, then put a couple holes to mount it to the firewall in there. Spaced them as best I could, and it looks like we should be in business. Now I'll have to mount this part first so that I can get to the screws, because I'm going to use the Allen. There we go. Allen screws there for that, and you won't be able to tighten them if that's already on there, but I'll put that on first, and it should be fine. So, still haven't decided on the actual final destination, but we're getting there quick. All right, progress update. So I got this side mounted. It's not complete yet. We've still got to do a few things, but it's rigidly on there just so we're straight. The brake booster, there's some extra lines in here right now. The brake booster will go to the large port on the manifold up there, and then the vacuum source from the manifold, the intake manifold, will be here, and it's going to loop back around. There'll be a check valve in this area here where my finger is, and then it'll come up and connect here, and that will provide source of vacuum to the entire manifold with a good bit of flow capacity. This fitting here is going to loop around to the air oil separator, and then this last fitting here will go to the HVAC. I've got some spare ports here. Did I need a 6-port one for that? No, but I'd rather have more than not enough. So who knows what'll pop up in the future. Anyhow, we're going to keep working. Next, I'll put the air oil separator in position. Okay, the oil air separator is in place. I just got to hook it up now. I'll need to paint those fittings plastic, but they've always been fine. So We're going to run a line from here to here, and then I'll also run a line from here to the HVAC. That'll finalize that, and then this fitting here will go down to the PCV valve on the back of the intake manifold. Alright, sorry for the fan in the last couple of videos. It gets hot down here. At any rate, that's pretty much going to do it. The excess thread locker sure shows up a lot more in the video than it does in real life. A couple scratches on there too. You really can't see that much in real life. I'm not real happy about the fact that this thing touches. Hello, clamp that just fell over. I'm not happy about the fact that this is laying on the intake manifold, but for right now, I'm going to let it ride, because what really needs to happen is I need to have a 90-degree fitting here that goes down, and then another 90-degree fitting. Well, this is a 90-degree fitting. If I turned it a different way and made it go down, and it could make a U shape and go underneath, but it's pretty densely packed in there already, and I really don't want a whole lot of more stuff occupying that area. So I'm going to let this ride for now, and once I get the check valve, should be coming in the mail tomorrow, I can insert it in this line here, and then finalize this connection here, and that will do for the vacuum only side of the house. I've got the HVAC line hooked up here too, and that's going over there to the valve to the vacuum reservoir that we did before. And the only other line that I got to hook up still is this one that goes straight down to the PCV valve. And I'll probably do that next. The grommet that holds the PCV valve in is, well, I'll just show it to you here. Garage is a mess now. Lots of things rolling. Where'd it go? There it is. So this is a factory style PCV valve and the insert that goes into the manifold. And I'll probably just put a bunch of RTV on it and call it good. I mean, it's still in decent shape. It's not hardened up or anything like that. Yeah, it's always been kind of like that, and it's always worked well enough. I might search around and see if I've got another one of these laying around. If I do, I'll put it in there, but more than likely I'm just going to put some sealant on there, stick it in, and call it good. So again, this side doesn't see-boost, and it's not likely that it's going to pop this out because I got a breather in the other valve cover. But I don't want that happening, so I'll make sure that that doesn't happen. All right, now that we've got the non-boosted side of the vacuum lines routed, we're going to work on the side that does need to see boost. The blow-off valve is going to go direct to the manifold because it's just easier. The way it's in the hood, I'll just show you. Here, dog bowl. All right, so the blow-off valve is down in the inner fender well on the driver's side, and it goes up right here, and it's kind of pointless to try to snake this all the way around the back side of the manifold just to hook up to that block. So we're going to hook it up pretty much right up underneath there where I had stuff hooked up before. And there's your ports right there. There's two. I'll block one of those off, and this one will just go there, and that'll be a very direct routing and shouldn't have any problems. The things that do need to go to the manifold here are the source, and that's a larger nipple for the source that matches the one that comes off of the intake manifold, and that's probably be 1/4 inch on that. These are 1/4 inch too, but I think these barbs flow a little bit better, so I'm going to use this for the source. And then this will be for the fuel pressure. That'll go direct to the fuel pressure regulator. Obviously the map sensor here, plug these two, and then the wastegate. And so that's going to be the tubing for the boosted side of the house. And of course these ends are blocked off because they're just not necessary in this. And that ought to work out pretty well. So we'll work on figuring out where that's going to live. Alright, this will be the final resting place of this vacuum manifold. And just to recap, this is the one that sees boost and vacuum. So we got the tap for the inlet manifold, intake manifold here. And then we're going to have fuel pressure regulator coming out here. And this is obviously the map sensor. Why do I keep saying obviously? It's just a map sensor. 2-bar for right now. And this one is for the wastegate. Alright, so that's how that's going to be. I'll start working the fittings. Alright, the blow-off valve is connected. Hose just runs straight up there, goes underneath to the manifold, and connects up. Now I'll see if I can get that out of the way so you can see it at least. There it is. And yeah, put a clamp on that. And the port next to it is sealed up as well. And you might wonder why I didn't put clamps on any of the other ones over here. Well, they never had clamps on them, and that's just the vacuum side. They won't see boost unless it back propagates through the crankcase pressure. But I got problems if that happens. But everything on the boosted side will have a clamp on it just to be sure. All right, so the boost solenoid is going to live on the back of the shock tower here, and I've already bolted it in with a hole that was open. Had to make a small adapter for the size of the fittings out of some smaller vacuum line. Should be fine. I went ahead and clamped it at every junction in the adapter and then ran the heat wrap up as far as it would go, which is fine. Now I'll have to repeat that process for the top side to the manifold, vacuum manifold I should say. And then that wastegate plumbing will be done. So I'll have to hook up the wiring for the solenoid, obviously. Alright, so my check valve that I ordered came in, and that's it right there. Seems to be a pretty well made part. Of course, I got it in there so you can't see the label and the arrow that shows which way it goes, but essentially it flows this way and not that way. And that makes sense, so it'll suck air through it, and as soon as this line sees boost, it'll slam shut, and that'll keep the boost out of the PCV system and the brake booster and the HVAC, which was the idea all along. And let me turn my attention back to the boost side of the house.